2, 1.
Awesome.
It says going live
We're
now.
Going live now. I believe that we are now live. All right.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. It is great to have everyone here. I would like to give a second to let everybody jump on. And I have a Daniel Brownstein here from District 112. And then I have Rebecca Cingolani. Thank you. From 110. Yes. So y'all are the Democratic nominees for your State House district. I am so excited to be running with you in this race in 2020. It's really an amazing time in South Carolina to be running for office. I think it's never been more apparent how important our government officials are. And I'm really excited to be running as a Democrat with y'all. So let me just give you a second. I'm gonna start with Rebecca. Why don't you just say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Rebecca, it's Rebecca niece Cingolani. I always add that niece in there because I've only been married 2 years. And so all of my adult life, I have been niece. And my family came here in the 70s, I think 74. And so I actually have a lot of family that are from Charleston, that live in Charleston with the name niece, or at least at some time. So I like to keep that in there just because sometimes I will be in random places and people will stop me and say, are you Lisa's sister or niece? Or, so there are people out there that we all kind of look alike. So
strong family resemblance.
Yes. So I'm here in Mount Pleasant. I've lived here only 5 years, but I've been coming here my whole life. I love it here. It has changed dramatically over the years, and mostly for the good. And I'm so excited to be a part of the history happening here now, because we are at a pivotal place where a lot of wonderful things can happen while we keep the charm and the beauty and what makes South Carolina so lovely to live in. So I'm really excited to be running as a Democrat as well. And that's super important to me. It was a choice that I made. I haven't been a Democrat my whole life. And so making that choice was really important. And I love the county party here. I think what they stand for is including everyone. And that is really important to me as well. And I see the commitment to including everyone all the time on a regular basis. So that is so critical for me, because it's where my heart is trying to get to a place where we can include everyone in all of our decisions.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, it's so nice to have you here. And it's been, such a neat thing to meet you in this journey and bring you, into our little fold and have you in our lives now. So, So Daniel, let's hear a little bit more from you.
Okay, well, like Rebecca, I'm not originally from South Carolina, but I moved here as a young adult as soon as I had the choice. So I started out my career writing for newspapers, and I followed some friends down to the Island Packet newspaper down in Hilton Head, where I covered local and state government, and also the cops and court system during my tenure there. I met my wife in the newsroom of the Island Packet, and we got married about 3 years later. At that point, the writing was sort of on the wall for journalism, unfortunately. And so I changed careers. I went to work for the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office, which is a very fancy way of describing a district attorney's office. And there, I got really involved in criminal justice reform. Our district covered the county of Beaufort, but then it also covered 4 other counties: Jasper, Colleton, Hampton, and Allendale. So it included the notorious corridor of shame and some very poor rural counties. And it was very eye-opening to see how people are living there and the lack of resources. And so we did some important things to bring services to those areas. One of them was a violence against women prosecution team, and then we also did a a court for teenagers to sort of address the underlying reason that they had started to break the law, whether it was substance abuse or family dynamics, and really tried to take them out of the traditional criminal justice system and give them the tools that they need to be productive. About 6 years ago, I moved up to Mount Pleasant and worked for a local law firm, Richardson, Patrick, Westbrook, and Brickman, that's right here in town. And we have 2 children. We have a rising 2nd grader and 3rd grader at Whitesides Elementary. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. I couldn't be happier to be running with such qualified, independent, strong women. I think that if you look at our entire Charleston area, you will see a next generation of leadership that looks very different from the leadership currently in place. And it's just such an exciting time. Y'all are such great candidates, and I'm so thrilled to be here alongside you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad y'all could join me today, because I think, especially in 2020 with, we have Jamie Harrison running for Senate and he's amazing. And we have Joe Cunningham, going for reelection. And we have county coroner, solicitors, all kinds of folks. So, I think it gets a little lost what we all do, and maybe why you should pay attention to who your state representative and your state Senate candidates are, because we have a lot of impact on the day-to-day lives of people in South Carolina. So today we're going to really talk about kind of the South Carolina House. It's part of the South Carolina General Assembly, and we are half of the General Assembly that makes up the laws that govern South Carolina. And I don't think a lot of folks know that South Carolina has one of the most powerful legislatures in the entire country. It goes back to the 1800s when the Constitution was amended to kind of decentralize authority. And it has just been modified and changed ever since. It's it's one of the longest constitutions now in this country, and a lot of interesting little weaves and ebbs and flows with trying to make things work. And it's the definition of inefficiency, which I think a lot of folks in South Carolina can sympathize about. So it's really important. I think one of the things that a lot of people that are new to politics, when they started kind of learning about it and researching that, we all said, well, gosh, like that's one of the first things we need to change. So why did, Rebecca, I'll start with you this time. Why did you decide to run for the South Carolina House? I mean, you really could have run for so many different offices. You live in a district where there were a lot of offices. And what about the South Carolina House appealed to you?
I don't know if that I can answer that question, but for me, it was the place that felt the easiest place for me personally to enter. I think on the level of when you're going further up, where you're going for South Carolina Senate, that's a whole different ball game. And it also is a very different ball game with more of the local positions. So maybe that would have been better for me if I had grown up here and lived here longer. But this is the prime place, because I can see the amount of change that is just about to happen. And I can see that it's going to be pivotal and big, and I want to be involved in that. And by the way, I'm so excited to be running with you all as well. I couldn't have asked for better people to have this little triangle, because we're kind of in a triangle together, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm honored and excited to not only know you all better, but to know that when we get there, that we are going to be with people who we might not agree on everything, but you're very reasonable people and understanding and really wanting to make a difference. So I think that's the baseline for anyone who's there, right? Yes. And so, when I turned 21, it was September 11th, 2001. And as you know, that was a big deal. And so for me, the idea of running probably started then, even though it was a seed and I didn't even know it was growing for a long time. But I saw that there were things that really needed to change as a result of this event. We saw a lot of inefficiencies in our government and things that needed to kind of be updated. And I was eager as a young adult to see how our country would handle those things. And they haven't. And so 20 years later, I'm sitting here saying I'm an adult and now I'm the one that's at the age to be making those decisions, and no one's made them. We've kind of just been playing catch up, but we don't really get ahead enough to actually plan for and have really solid plans for when pandemics happen. So if we would have had some better systems in place, this could have gone a little bit easier. So I'm hoping that's really what I'm interested in doing, is bringing us into this age and beyond, just so that we're more prepared for hurricanes, for pandemics, whatever happens, we have a really solid foundation to start from.
Yeah. How about you, Daniel?
So I've had some experience with the state legislature. Back in 2012, I was a part of a group that lobbied the state for a anti-human trafficking law, and we were successful in that effort. So I spent a lot of time in Columbia lobbying legislators. And then in 2015, we passed a statewide budget for all of the prosecutors' offices in the state that added 104 prosecutors throughout the state to ensure that every county has a full-time prosecutor, which was not the case before then. So I have a little bit of experience dealing with the legislature. And the reason that I think it is such an important, the House is such an important office, is that if you think about all of the things in your life that are important to you, related to your community and where you live, most of those things are controlled or touched by the State House, our schools, our roads, our environmental regulations, criminal justice reform. Those are all more, those are issues that are dealt with more at the state or the local level rather than the federal level. So I think it is the best place to make an impact on our quality of life. It's a layer of government that is very close to our communities, should be very responsive to our communities. And sadly, that wasn't the case in my district. My district is about half of Mount Pleasant, so it's Rifle Range Road, that corridor, and then also the northern part of the town on 17, as well as IOP and Sullivan's Island. And you can look back at what our current state rep has done or not done after the past 11 years, and it's very eye-opening. Basically our district did not have a seat at the table where these important decisions are being made. I think our whole region as a whole is very talented, has a lot of resources, and should be a thought leader in the State House. So when our current representative decided that he was going to retire in March, I thought it's sort of now or never. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We have an open seat in my community. We haven't had a seat at the table, so let's do it. And I thought that, win or lose, my children could look at me as and recall this time that when our world was so crazy and so messed up and depressing, that their dad was out there trying to make a difference. And that it really came down to that. It was a last minute decision, but it's a decision that I've been building up to my entire life.
That's awesome. So I decided to run for the House. Once I kind of made that decision to run, that was kind of a different motivation. But when I really started to think about where I really wanted to invest my time and where I thought I could have the most impact and accomplish the goals for my community, I realized it's where the money is at. And the South Carolina House has so much to say about where we spend our money, and where you spend your money is going to dictate how policies are carried out. And so my motivation was the fact that so much legislation is made through provisos in the budget that's passed each year. And that was why I chose the House. So yeah,
I hope we can. That's an important distinction that you just mentioned about how our government currently budgets its money. So hopefully we can get into that a little bit later.
Definitely, yes. So in terms of the South Carolina House, was anybody surprised when you saw how infrequently it's in session and how much it pays? Do you even know, Rebecca? Have you looked it up?
Why would you ask me that? No. No, I do. There are some times where I don't want to know things because it colors my opinion too much, but definitely those are things that I wanted to know. And yes, I was a little surprised, but not surprised. And I think it says a lot about why we are where we are here in South Carolina. And I'm excited to help move that along a little bit. Because for me, it's $10,400 a year. For me, from my perspective, that stays at that level because it keeps a lot of the population out of it. It's made for the elite. It's made for people who are independently wealthy or have a spouse that has enough money. And that cuts out, I don't know what percentage of the population, but I'm imagining it's pretty high. So it changes the way that it's not a true representation of our culture here. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was so excited when J.A. Moore and Crystal Simmons Matthews was elected, because those are two people that traditionally haven't been able to participate. So a chef and, someone who works for a manufacturing company and has, 5 children and is single, that's a perspective that was so needed in the legislature. And I mean, if you listen to every word that comes out of Crystal's mouth, it's just genius, because it's just from a perspective that traditionally has not been voiced in the State House. So how about you, Daniel? You've been around, you've been dealing with it, so you probably knew exactly what you were signing up for.
Yeah, I was prepared for, what the office pays and sort of how frequently it meets and obviously where it meets in Columbia. I was maybe a little bit more naive about the campaigning side of things. I thought, hey, I can come in, win this primary, take a month off, recover, and then sort of start to gear up for November. And I did luckily win my primary, but there was no rest afterwards. It's really like pedal to the metal from here on out through November. I think that Rebecca is absolutely right about the low salary of the position keeping people out of the process. If you look at our legislature, you can very clearly see the types of people who are able to serve. And like you said, that's people who own their own businesses, that's lawyers, that's insurance agents, people who are independently wealthy. And it skews pretty old, it's a lot of older men specifically who are charting our course as a state. And I really think that we do need a more diverse legislature that's reflective of its population. I will say I am not independently wealthy. I'm not super wealthy or wealthy at all. If you would have, when we moved from Beaufort to Mount Pleasant, we sold our house in Beaufort for $170,000. And then we came to Mount Pleasant, and I swear it was like an episode of House Hunters. Like, here's the 3 cheapest houses in Mount Pleasant, pick the least worst of them. And we literally did it in one day, drove around, saw the 3 houses we could possibly afford if we stretched ourselves. And so I would not put myself in sort of that elite, wealthy category that's typical of this office. My wife and I both work. We have 2 kids, and we really understand what it's like to struggle and to put certain bills off or certain repairs off to cover unforeseen expenses. Your kid puts a Lego up her nose the day before your biggest meeting of the year, and you find yourself at the MUSC emergency room, shelling out $500 to have the little Lego removed, and a life is like that, and I think that we should have people who reflect the communities that they serve, and that's what's so exciting right now, seeing all y'all, and it's just a totally different generation of leadership that's about to take root here.
Yeah, I think it's natural for folks to think, oh, our servant leaders should be doing this because they're servants, and they shouldn't, they should just, not have a salary or give that salary back. And I mean, I gotta be honest with you, there were probably times in my life where I kind of saw the wisdom in that and thought about that. But once I really got into it and understood it and started thinking about it and the dynamics of who is allowed to serve and the impact that that has on the legislation that comes out of it, really had me questioning that. So I just think that's something that a lot of people don't know about and don't think about when they think about the State House. And to think about that, make sure that there is some diversity in the folks that we are sending to Columbia, so that we actually get legislation that works for everybody.
Well, I
think sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, if it was a salary that was livable, it not only would we be able to support ourselves just on that, but we could spend a lot longer in session. Because right now the session is very short. We could have a whole nother session in the fall and make almost double the progress, or maybe even double the progress that we can now. So I think with whatever it would cost to make that shift into a full-time position, that it would pay out in loads by the policies coming out of there.
Yeah, and so, what we find is that when you really look at where legislation is created and what's happening, is it's happening in committees behind closed doors. Even within the elite of the legislature, there's another little group that really sets the agenda, allows what they want on the floor. I have seen representatives, publicly state support for something, and then they were the committee chairperson that had the ability to bring it, to the floor, and chose not to. And so, that's one of the things people need to understand, that most of these decisions are being made with limited public knowledge, visuals on it. So, I would rather sit in a subcommittee meeting and hear what's going on there than I would ever listen to what's happening on the House floor, because it really has already kind of been decided by the time it gets there. And very rarely do you have stuff happening on the floor that's shocking.
So
yeah, that's where the sausage grinding occurs, at the committee level and subcommittee level. I think, for those of us that, or those out there that don't know, our state legislature currently meets, like Rebecca said, basically January through June, and then they typically do not meet very often in that second half of the year. And it's 3 days a week. It's like Tuesday through Thursday, those 6 months out of the year. And you're right. I think that to govern a state in modern times with a faster pace of challenges that are coming, that we're coming up against, it makes sense to extend that session. You can look at things right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we still don't know if everybody's going to be able to vote absentee by mail this November, because our legislature is not in session. And that's a decision that needs to be made now, so that the county election boards and the state election commission can prepare for an influx of paper ballots. And sadly, we can't even get the legislature to convene right now to literally save people's lives and make it easier on the poll workers, and make it easier for people to cast their ballot this November. And that's a real, it's real telling that we can't even get them to come in and make a decision when things are literally life or death.
Yeah. So one of the things that kind of surprised me when I first decided to run, I had a question about ethics filings. That's one of the most important things you do as a politician is have transparency in your fundraising and that process. And so I called to ask a question. They said, oh, no, you need to call the South Carolina House Ethics. The House has its own ethics. So South Carolina House of Representatives we are our own ethics committee. We police ourselves. That was surprising to me to find that out.
Yeah, and that didn't go so well at the federal level when they were, policing Congress was policing itself in terms of sexual harassment allegations and things like that. So it's I am in favor of an independent agency or entity looking out for the people of this state. I think another unfortunate consequence of the low salaries for legislators is that it really encourages and breeds corruption. A lot of the people who are in office or running for office don't necessarily have their district's best intentions in mind. There's a lot of people who steer contracts towards their businesses or their friends' businesses. And you can just look back over the last 20 or 30 years, and there's been several major FBI investigations and other investigations that have really taken down lawmakers for their corruption, and that's an unfortunate side effect of the low salary that the office pays, and it's sort of a reflection of the greed of some of the people who run for office.
Yeah, and I mean, I think fundraising is the least favorite part of any politician. Well, maybe not, but I certainly don't like it. That's not what I think of when I think of being, a public servant and a leader, fundraising. But unfortunately, that's something we spend a lot of time doing to get the word out to the community about who we are and what we stand for. But with so few people running with opposition, it was kind of shocking to see how much money they're raising to not run a race.
I had a primary, and luckily my background is in marketing, and my wife's background is in graphic design, so we were able to kind of do a lot of things ourselves in a low cost manner. But it's unfortunate that it takes so much money to run for office, and if you sort of extrapolate that and think of the thousands and thousands of local and state positions throughout this country, and if each one of those costs tens of thousands of dollars to win, that's a lot of money that's sloshing around in our politics, and there's a lot of people who benefit from that. So it's a very entrenched part of our electoral system that's very hard to root out, but we absolutely have to take the money out of politics. It is a corrupting influence, all the way through, from campaigning to serving to running for re-election. There's a common thread throughout all of that, and it's money. And if you're, it just has the potential to influence legislation and budget decisions and who gets contracts, and it's just so messy because of it.
Yeah.
For me, I know both of you have been doing a phenomenal job with your fundraising. And as a first-time candidate, I'm a little bit behind there. So, if anyone's listening and you're in my district and you want to support me, it's rc4sc.com. I'm just throwing it out there. But I've taken the approach that I'm really, really studying how the fundraising is working before I'm reaching out. I'm just at the moment where I'm about to start to unload the fundraising component. And I know you two are you've been doing it for months, but I did have a couple of deaths in my family. So I've been working through that grieving process the last couple of months, but also it's really important for me to keep my authenticity. And I noticed is the fundraising components going on with people and their campaigns that the authenticity level drastically reduces. And I do not want that to be a part of what it is that I'm doing. So I'm really sitting with it and allowing for how can I make sure that the message that I'm giving is authentic and that what it is that I'm trying to transmit to people is going to stay throughout, and allow that to help me with my fundraising and to get creative. The whole point of what it is that we're doing is how can we do it differently, more efficiently, And so I'm working with the ethics committee to kind of let me do some things that have not previously been done before, as a way to kind of allowing that to happen a little different. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. And I think that's one thing that if I could kind of impart anything to the general community, is that this idea that politicians are bugging you or intruding into your lives, or that, you don't want to see politics, talked about in community groups and things. The culture that supports is that we do have to kind of spend a lot of money to get in your face and let you see like who we are and what we stand for. And so one of the ways that I know we can reduce the impact that money has on elections is for the community to demand venues, and become more engaged in the process of learning about the people that are running to represent them. So it's a culture thing for sure. And so, the idea, I would really love for people to think, oh, it's kind of neat that somebody who represents, tens of thousands of people in this state and makes laws that will literally affect where my kid goes to school, what my healthcare rights are, wants to talk to me, wants to hear what I have to say, and, wants to share their thoughts and their visions. In this country, it's a privilege to be able to vote for who's going to represent you and who's going to make the laws that govern you. And so that's one thing I really wish that more people understood. This isn't about Democrats, Republicans. We need to be civil, but it absolutely is probably one of the most important things going on in our lives right now, who represents us. And, unfortunately right now, it's whoever has the most money is who kind of gets in front of you and who shows up in your digital ads and in your mailbox and in your text box. And it shouldn't be that way. So that's just my 2 cents about that, in terms of the House and Senate candidates. And that applies from the municipal all the way up to federal. So yeah.
I mean, I'm with you. My favorite part of the whole process of running for office is talking to regular people, and not talking to people to ask them for money, but talking to them to find out what the biggest issues of in their estimation are, get their thoughts about what we need to be doing to address them, and then trying to convince them to vote for me. I think that's so much more valuable than any money that somebody could give me. Is I need your input, and I need your vote at the end of the day. I think it really comes down to, do you want somebody who is approachable, who's responsive to your concerns, or do you want the status quo? And do you want a politician that's only listening to a certain network of powerful donors? I think the three of us, represent our communities very well. People know where to find us. Most people probably have my cell phone number. In fact, it's right on my web page. So I think that the easier that we can make ourselves available to citizens, and the more intently we can listen to them and consider their ideas and their opinion, whether we agree with it or not, makes us better legislators, and makes the decisions that we make in Columbia better for the communities that we represent. And it's just so much fun to get to know people by calling them. I hope that someday soon we'll be able to do it in person, because that's even better. But I just love hearing people's stories and finding out what's important to them, and how I could be of service to them.
Definitely.
Well, and at least for my district, it's making the commitment to just show up. Being someone who's going to actually get to Columbia those 3 days a week for those 6 months. You can't do anything if you're not there. So that's a big piece of it, is just making the commitment to.
And you're right, it's a huge commitment. I mean, it's not something that you do if you want to make money, or it's service, plain and simple. It's a losing proposition in terms of time and money. It's you need to be altruistic if you're going to seek this office, because it's essentially a full-time job, even though it isn't. So, the three of us, we're going to be balancing work, family matters, kids, and serving our state and our community. So I think it's totally worth it. I think that the only way that we're going to move forward is for regular people to start stepping up and running for these offices, and for the population of our communities to start paying attention to these down ballot races that are so important to your daily lives and for the future of your children.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say one thing that is my favorite thing about our legislature, our House, is a lot of people don't realize that it's not like Congress, where you have the Republicans on one side of the auditorium and then you have the Democrats on the other. We're seated together by legislative delegation. So that means all of the Charleston area legislators, Republican or Democrat, are seated at the same area in the State House. And I think that's there's a lot of geographic rivalries in South Carolina, but there's very few purely partisan votes. And I think that the way that we seat our legislators sort of reflects that. You have a team of people with different ideologies, all trying to do what's best for our region of the state. And I think that's really cool. I love working with people from all walks of life. And frankly speaking, if we're going to get anything done in this state, it's going to require a give and take with people who don't agree with you. And it's just, I think it's going to be so exciting when the three of us are there in January.
Yes.
I find it surprising. Maybe you can relate in a different way, but because I lived in California. When I lived in California, I had a business, and most of my clientele were middle-aged men. So I spent every day, all day with middle-aged men and me. And I was in my 20s, and I'm not very big. I'm only 5'1", so I'm small. And so I always wondered, how did I get here? And why am I here exactly? I mean, I enjoyed it. I learned so much. And now it makes sense to me. This is why I'm here. Do you have any of those things in your life that being here now in this position, wanting to be there?
Do you want to take? I feel like I've been, kind of on this path, maybe obliviously, for my entire life. It just, things don't make sense necessarily in the moment, but in retrospect, I can see that this job gave me this, and then I switched to this, which gave me additional experience. And so I feel like I've been, even though I didn't decide until this year to run for office, I feel like I've been preparing for it for a while. And there's been a couple of serendipitous things that have happened. There was a woman that was very instrumental in me getting my job here in Mount Pleasant, who had a name. And then as soon as I started running for office, someone with a very similar name who I didn't know reached out to me. And there's little things like that confirm for me that I'm doing the right thing, even if it doesn't always feel that way.
Yeah.
It's fun when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one last question, but before I do, I'm going to ask that if there are folks watching and you have a question for us, please go ahead and type it in the comments and we will answer it. So I'll give everybody a few minutes to do that and ask one final follow-up question. What would be your legislative priority? And I'll start with Daniel.
Okay, my district is really on the front lines of a lot of the environmental challenges that we face, representing Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. So really the protection of our coast is one of the most important issues for me in my district. We have the persistent threat of offshore drilling. In fact, NOAA is moving forward with seismic testing, which is a very invasive, disruptive way, testing that they do to check for underground oil and natural gas. We also have these little tiny plastic pellets called nurdles that are the basic component of other kinds of plastic. And these are washing up on our beaches because Charleston, while a lot of people were not paying attention, has become a major player in our plastics industry. In fact, we're expanding these plastic companies in our port right now, and our government is actively encouraging and subsidizing it. So we are very much in a fight against plastic in my district. We were among the first to have plastic bag bans. We've had to fight to keep those intact in Columbia. We have climate change that's really changing the dynamic of our coast and threatening our communities. Other than the environment, education is obviously super important. I have a second and a third grader. We have great schools in this district, but if you look elsewhere in South Carolina, other kids aren't so fortunate. And so sadly, you're sort of able to predict future incarceration rates by a child's zip code, and that's abhorrent to me, and that we need to do something about it. And third is obviously this pandemic has illustrated the need for a strong public health system, for the expansion of Medicaid, and just, our state needs to do everything that it can to ensure that our workers and our small businesses, could stay afloat for these next couple of years. So whether that's a tax deferral, whether that's a grant program, I'm not sure, what would be the most impactful, but we really need to be cognizant about how we are helping our small businesses and our workers, because it's a tough time right now. I've got neighbors who have been out of work for months. The federal unemployment addition to the typical amount, the supplement, I guess it would be described as, has run out, and we're not sure if that's going to be included in the next stimulus bill at the federal level. So I think that we need to rally around our neighbors as a state, and really make sure that we have an all hands on deck approach to ensure people survive this really, really terrible period in our history.
Yes. Rebecca, how about you?
Well, I will start out by saying this, and I've said this before, is that once you say that you want to do something when you get to Columbia, and these are the things that I feel like I have a commitment to now. In what order or how that happens, I'm not sure how that'll occur. It's getting in there and figuring out how to do things most efficiently. Sometimes you can get, you got to get your bearings with it, but definitely growing a green economy is really important to me. And it's not just about growing a green economy. It's about knowing what the impact is going to be for those plastic companies, and having a way to monetize that maybe I don't know this for sure, but maybe we don't not allow the plastic, but maybe as a part of that, we are thinking about the impact that's going to have and how to prevent that from getting into our groundwater or washing up on our beaches and all the other things. But we have to be thinking about that at every step of the way and figuring out how to prevent any other things from polluting our environment, because there already are a lot of things that have been there a long time that we don't really have control over, but we do have control over it as we go in the future. We can't say we didn't know, we did know. And so let's, start there. But also education is a big one for me. And I want to say that I appreciate teachers, and I can't even tell you how much I appreciate teachers. I think they are, as I'm sure parents now, my daughter's only 2. So she's not in the school system yet, but I'm sure parents are appreciating the teachers more now. But I think we need to be a lot better to our teachers as a way to start the education component, because we can't even start if we're not even allowing them to flourish, right? So giving them retirement that they can count on. We're $26 billion in debt there. I keep reminding people that, because if you don't know, that's a huge deficit for our teachers' retirement. So let's let them feel secure in their everyday life so that they can function and teach our kids as best as they can and allow them the space to be able to be creative enough to figure out how to move education forward, because the techniques that worked 30 years ago, 50 years ago, it's outdated. And so we're seeing that now, very, very prevalent in our experience, right? So that might not have happened, but we can't do anything about that in this moment, but we can plan for the future so it doesn't happen again. Of course, flooding is huge here, right? My district is the lower half of the peninsula, so that's something that's always on my mind. And there's a lot of different options. Quite frankly, I'm not sure what the right one is, but it is something that I'm always wanting. If people have information, if you're listening to this and you have information that you want me to hear, please, it's Rebecca@rc4sc.com. I would love to hear any information you want to give me on any topic, but specifically for the flooding component, because I think there's a lot still that we don't know and the best course of action there. And infrastructure. That's a huge conversation, how to do that. So that's all the things that I'm really interested in. But whatever is important to everyone is important to me too. So I think that changes as time goes on, and how that looks once I get there is really dependent on what it looks like, surveying the scene once you get there.
Definitely. Yeah, there were two things that I overwhelmingly heard from in the community that they were really concerned about, and that was education and infrastructure, and really specifically the traffic. And really, I think that the approach that we need to be taking as legislators is to be proactive instead of reactive. That's something that our entire state has been very reactive to every situation. The crisis has to happen, and then they begin to come up with a plan to deal with it. It's very expensive. It's inefficient to do it that way. And so if there's one thing I want to bring to the legislature, it's the ability to think about planning ahead and, creating a plan where we are in control, where we get to dictate the process and the procedure, so that we're not in a situation where we are realizing that a cable has snapped or cable is insufficiently strong and a bridge gets shut down for a month. That does nothing to help our economy. So,
yeah, I was just going to say, Jen, your district is in the very forefront of these infrastructure needs. The James Bell Bridge you just mentioned, Route 41, designed for a totally different era before we put pretty big developments on it, and all those infrastructure projects would benefit everybody east of the Cooper, plus all of our visitors. 526, we cannot.
526.
I know traffic isn't bad right now, but 526, it cannot take people an hour to travel 8 miles. It just can't. It just cannot. So I applaud you for putting infrastructure right at the top of your list.
Yeah, we all have people that live on, all of our districts meet up on Long Point Road. And so Long Point Road is a huge issue. Highway 41, 526, 26 up in the Hanahan area, which is in my district. That entire community was not, there is no infrastructure in the roads planned to adequately move the folks that are going through there to other places. And so all of those are things that we need to address and figure out. They are some of the biggest infrastructure challenges in the state are kind of located right in our little area. So really important. So I'm going to go ahead and check and see if we have any comments that we need to answer. And let's see here. Give me just 1 second to pull them up. And let's see here. Being kind of slow. Okay. And let's see here. Charlie asked, what are the top 1 or 2 issues that the candidates want to work on immediately once elected? I think we kind of talked a little bit about that, but how about you just give me two issues, couple words.
I would definitely say education, and I would break that to 2 components for the teachers and the students. Those are both separately 2 very different issues. So that would be what I would say.
Okay. And Charlie wants to know what, I'm sorry, Daniel, you go on ahead.
My top two would be protection of our environment and to help our schools adapt to this coronavirus and to reduce the disparities between different areas of the state.
Okay. And Charlie wants to know, what do you both think the pros and cons are of raising the pay of the General Assembly to a living wage and increasing the amount of time they meet during the year?
Well, I think the pros is that it would bring a lot of new people into the process who are not independently wealthy, who work regular jobs or up until they join the legislature. And I think that it would also reduce some of the corruption that occurs in Columbia. The cons is that nobody wants to be in Columbia and voting to give themselves a raise. It just it's unseemly, and that's probably part of the problem. I think that if we did want to move to that sort of approach, that I think it would be better suited for the voters of the state to make that decision than somebody in Columbia voting to give themselves a raise, which is just terrible optics.
Nobody's gonna do that. How about you, Rebecca?
I probably would, because I feel that. Yeah, right. I agree with everything that Daniel says. The one con that I could see is that it could possibly, on another level, increase corruption, because we are spending more time with each other and kind of infiltrated in a system. And so you could see how that would make it so we would be less relatable, because we've kind of submerged ourselves even further in it. But I don't think that would outweigh the benefit of having like a fall session where we keep what we have, we take a summer break, kind of work through the stuff that we started in the beginning of the year, and have a fall session that's 3 months long or whatever. Yeah.
And Lori just wanted to mention that people are shocked at how bad human trafficking is in South Carolina when they find out about that. And it, the I-95 corridor, it is a big issue in South Carolina.
Yeah, if you look at human trafficking, a lot of it's very prevalent in tourist areas and also around military installations. And South Carolina has both of those things in spades. So it's a crime that you have probably witnessed in your life. You just don't know it. Do you know that person that's painting your nails at the salon, are they free to leave whenever they want? Are they being paid a living wage? I don't know, and you don't either. And that's the problem with it. It's a clandestine crime that occurs in plain sight, and it mimics legitimate business. So it's very clearly still a problem. I think that people think of it as border smuggling, that human trafficking is getting somebody from Mexico into America, and then that person is sort of cut free and can do whatever they want with their life. And the reality is that is two things. It's one, that person is essentially in bondage. They are a slave when they come into this country. And just because they're in America does not make them free. They are still beholden to whatever organization brought them here. And then the second point is that it's not always an international issue. Human trafficking is using fraud, violence, coercion to get to somebody to do something that they don't want to do. And you see a lot of that, unfortunately, with prostitution, that a lot of the women and men who are prostitutes are not there through their own volition. They are making money for somebody else. They've either been beaten into it, they've been they get addicted to drugs a lot of times from the person who has trafficked them, and they're dependent on that person for every aspect of their life. And it's a very sad issue. And luckily South Carolina did improve its law, and they have started to prosecute some cases, but the reality is that our law enforcement in general throughout the state is not equipped to handle it. It takes some very deep investigation to really get past that superficial layer of you know, the employees at the nail salon will tell the investigators, hey, I'm here, you know, on my own volition, I can leave at any time. And you really need to break through that, that misinformation to get to the truth and to put those people who are actually responsible for it to justice. We've made strides over the last 8 years since that law has been passed, but there's clearly much more that needs to be done.
Yes, yes. So it's clear that folks really need to, you know, get involved and learn about the people that are running to represent them. There's a lot of challenges in the state, and you know, the stakes have never been higher, and it is so important moving forward who we send to Columbia to make the laws that just, you know, really impact our day-to-day life. So thank you both for joining me. It was so great to spend some time with you and hear your vision for the state and kind of talk about, you know, what we're going to be doing up there. So thank you for joining me. And
Thank you.
yes, awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much for hosting. And I really, like I said, I love that we're all running side by side. It's such an exciting time for the Charleston area with the most Democratic candidates in 30 years. We've got candidates for every office from, you know, coroner to you know, U.S. Senator. It's really a pretty cool experience, and I'm just so impressed by the quality of all of the candidates. And I know in my heart that these are the people that are going to make a difference in our state, because they are so much more reflective of their communities than what's in power now. So I would encourage everybody to you know, go online, go to the League of Women Voters website, really research all of the different candidates from that lowest race to the highest one. And I think you're going to be impressed by what you find.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. See you very soon on the campaign trail, even if it's virtual.
Thanks again, Jen.
Bye.
Bye-bye.